If you've watched me for quite a while now, you would know that I am deeply passionate about writing. But writing is such a vague term that trying to break it down into little bits and pieces involves multiple ideas and guides that one day I'll get to. But for now, I just want to talk about the idea of words itself. Words are everything we do. It's the language we make, it's the way we communicate, and it's the way we go about our everyday lives, whether that be the work we make, like in the business, or simply just the stories we tell. That comes with ideas that we want to share out to the world. But how do we get those ideas out to begin with? That's what got me back into journaling. You see, I've been an avid journalist ever since I was 13. When I got huge into writing at the end of my 8th grade year, I really wanted to just write ideas down, and even if it wasn't a perfect story, I wanted to understand and wrap my head around certain things that I'm not even there yet. And to this day, I still don't have the full questions nor answers to. But with this video in mind, it's a good idea to look back at those journals and see what it takes to be not just a good writer, but a successful one at that. The key to writing is always writing the ideas you have. Any idea or any thought bubble you want to create, you just simply write it down. And I would suggest pen and paper because while laptops are good for the convenience, pen and paper is just right there. With that notion in mind, I came to just do a similar video to my Give Me 20 Minutes and showcase all the journals I've made. So I don't have the original copies I've once had, but with that in mind, I still have all the journals I've put my effort into. Journals on my end is such a gratifying feeling because I do so much little details in the mix, whether that be the gratitude parts in the middle or the illustrations or just the words about what I'm trying to say or do on that specific day. And this all started with my edgy freshman year journal that even if I am not too proud of, I am rather impressed by the cover, to say the least. Handwriting wise, it's not one of my favorites, but the key I recently learned about this journal is just pure creativity. I love the aspect of simply writing down all these ideas in mind because while I'd say work, and routine is the biggest aspect as a writer, I also like the simplistic side. It takes me back to a good time back in summer of 2023. Now that it's winter of 2025, it's been, generally speaking, a really cold moment. And I'm just grateful finding these pieces out because with these journals, I really wanted to emphasize gratitude and how they help with whatever type of success you're creating. And with this in mind, I continued to write down and just create something that's even bigger than me. And I feel relatively happy that I've gotten to the point now that I can look back and see just how far I've come. That's one of the greatest feelings about journaling as a whole. Even if you don't have the greatest ideas, believing in that success will come because of these journals. You just write whatever idea I had in mind with like hundreds upon hundreds of pages, as you can see here. Even if the handwriting isn't good, I progressively got better as the time went on, and slowly but surely by the end I had fully fledged out handwriting, and I'd say it worked out wonderfully. The thing about journaling is that it takes time. It's similar to a book in which you write so much little details in between with words in the mix, and it's all so much nonsense that you have to break it down, and to make it easier, just not try as much. And that's exactly what I did last year with my 2024 journal, writing about a title, Nothing Nonetheless, a simple piece that did exactly what I wanted and needed. This journal I had in mind came at a time where I really didn't know what I wanted to do come after freshman year. I knew by this point I already had the book I've been writing for quite a while, but with this journal in mind, I recently wanted to just talk about certain ideas I haven't had the time to get across. I know exactly what I want to do with these types of journals and continued the gratitude aspect, but it is just nonsense that I'm not the proudest of as opposed to the first journal, but I am glad I found the space to do this, and balancing out with my book earlier in the year helped me secure wherever I am going and what I wanted to do with that time. And now the last piece of journaling I have is one I haven't even finished. I haven't come up with a title or anything, but I have the ideas jotted down, and I've written just about halfway through, written through my August time in my life, and I'd say it worked out wonderful. Now all these journals are great, but what does this mean for you? This video, as you can probably see, over exceeds the 20-minute mark, and just in the first 5 minutes alone, I've already talked about the big 3 journals I have been working on in the past 2 years. So what does it mean for you? I recently wanted to get back into journaling due to a personal experience with a falling out with a friend I've had. As good as the terms were, I did understand that a lot of it was, like these journals, complete nonsense. And with my new future and this new era of my life in mind, I had to make sure and understand exactly what I want to do with this period, what I should be as a writer and up-and-coming entrepreneur, and understand the type of product and success I want to make based on these videos alone. And that led me back to journaling. Journaling, if I recall, was the single greatest piece of figuring out exactly what I wanted to do. It's such a vague term that you can look up literally any way of how to journal, and you can have a relative success to whatever you want to do. Whether that be just sharing out gratitude pieces, a prayer before nighttime, or especially setting up the goals before the start of the next day. I like using Google Calendar now, but in my past, I really enjoyed just writing the journal pieces inside my journal and figuring out the goals from there. It aided a lot, and I was truly appreciative of what I did in that spare time to then have so much free space in my summer. It's not so much the same, as things do inevitably change with time. Like every good writer, you need to read and write. You need to continue putting that input and output. And by having those pieces come together, you have a relative amount of success that only comes with journals. Now, I'll give you my 5 big tips to journaling and how it can help you as a writer not just become a better writer, but a successful writer. So here we go. Tip number 1, I would highly advise practicing gratitude. It's such a dumb cop-out to talk about how to become a better writer just by mentioning your mental health, but I need to stress this enough because the way you write is all predetermined by your mind. How well you sleep, what you eat, and how often you exercise depends on that aspect of your mindset. And then using your mind, you then use the words you want to create. It's how I'm creating this video here. I concentrated my mind on exactly what I wanted to say and provide with this message. And speaking of which, I just continued to just evolve with that space to then write about it all in a journal. And that's best done with gratitude, because gratitude is among the greatest feelings, just being grateful for what you possibly have. Now that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, I would advise to write down all future ideas. Right before you go to bed, I've recently learned that and experimented with that if you go to bed before a specific amount of time, having that exact period you always go to bed and wake up at, you know exactly what you want to do the following day. But with that notion, you will have ideas that come together in a way that you don't often see. These ideas that come together are so vast and expansive, you simply need to write it down. As much as I would love to say my first book was entirely planned, a lot of the ideas came to me in the middle of the night. And what I did then was just journal exactly what I'm planning for that specific book. It can be nothing more than just a few bullet points, but it's a great feeling to just express what you have in mind, because there's so much more in store than you could possibly imagine. And with that notion in mind, I have much more ideas that all come because of a journal. It's what continues to write, and I'd say it's better than normal paper because it's all right there. all placed in a specific order that you can then use the dates for. Everyone has taken notes in school. You don't have to be as specific as school notes, but you don't have to treat a journal as school notes either. It's a way to express yourself and those ideas, and you can't become a better writer nor a better or successful person even without expressing your ideas. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is to simply break it down. You break down a journal by using the pages you have. You have a certain amount of pages and checking the size of whatever journal you have, because journals are cheap. I don't think you have to worry all too much about it. But having that specific idea of what you want to do with a journal, you break it down and use it to your advantage. This has a nuanced approach to it, because journals, in my own experience, I've had it like distract me from all the big pieces I wanted to do. I felt I could have worked on my book even more, but in all honesty, I was only using 10% of my possibilities. I was 10% of my own capabilities and what I'm capable of, and I didn't use it all fully because of these journals. And now I want to advise you, if you want to get into journaling because of this video, to simply break it down. You don't need to do much. Just say a couple gratitude notes, which can be just 1 sentence to 5 words, or just to talk about ideas you have for future books. The reason why I would suggest you to write this all down and not exactly a Google Calendar is because you'd get way further ahead with these journals. You know exactly what you're planning the next day because it's wide out in the open compared to a closed laptop or a turned off phone. And by having this notion in the future, you have so much ideas present and talked about when you come like 3-4 years from now. If I can feel this grateful for what I've created from my past life, then you can feel just as grateful, if not more, if you get started now. The 4th tip I want to give about journaling is to simply use creativity. Creativity is a problem solver to hundreds of ideas. You may not be the most creative person, but I would still suggest that if you want to get into whatever you're trying to do and write down whatever sport, exercise, or idea you have in mind, you need to not only just break it down, but creatively go about that structure. You have tens of hundreds of ideas with the pages you write, and by breaking those pieces down with whatever idea you can put onto paper, you then have it just by using the creative highlights and note-taking skills. This makes me sound like a teacher, and I am advising this piece fully, but it makes me understand exactly why journaling matters way more than schoolwork, in the idea that it's all up to you. You have the choice to control your life, and if you want to be successful just like me, then you need to understand that what you need to get done, you need to do it exactly the way you're supposed to. You need to be creative with the problems you have, break it down, and then use those pieces to then build yourself up and appreciate the gratitude way later in life. 5th and final step, number 5. 5th and final one I want to suggest with a journal is to have fun. Because of course you can't have work, in the idea that you can't have a writing piece without having fun with it. Be honest with yourself and truly let yourself explain and express these feelings. A journal isn't just a way to tell a story and become a creative and more fulfilling writer that way. You use it to express your emotions. Again, the mental health thing goes crazy, but it helps add onto what you've already learned. You have much more in store, and by consistently coming back to whatever you're writing about and whatever idea you can have, it's exactly how it goes. I recently had a couple events and stupid moments during my winter break, and I wanted to just write it all down, but I deeply regret not journaling in that time because it's largely forgotten to time. And even with the journals in mind, I honestly say they strengthen memories much, much more. By having a journal nearby your side, no matter how big or small, you write down ideas so much more fulfilling and so much more creative that even if I'm just spouting out words to you, you have something to do. So all it takes is just a piece of paper and a pen. A piece of paper and pen is where it starts, but a full-on journal is exactly where I'd begin. Just get it somewhere cheap and no matter what, write down on it. A ball can be used in hundreds of thousands of ways, but a pen and paper can be used even more than a ball. It can be used 1,000 times more than the thousands of ball hits you can do to a wall. And with that notion in mind, I hope you understand that journals are there to write ideas, help cultivate some sort of story you're trying to make, and share out a message to the world that you know exactly will do. I've been writing tons of music pieces in my journals, and while it's mostly just chord progression and lyrics, they help me create songs I don't think I would have been possible making without writing them down prior. And that's the special thing about journals is that they're both timeless and manageable. They have an efficient record of just being there for you, but they're also there to just simply educate what you can do better. And by looking back on it years later, you know exactly all the answers. Sometimes you might be right on what you say. Sometimes you might be wrong. But in that learning experience, we become better human beings by exactly knowing what it takes to be better and using it to our advantage. And all it takes is one journal entry and a gratitude piece later, we'd end up at the level we'll get to. That's a feeling I've discovered called grit, in which the further you work on something, the better you get at it. Journals help and aid in that fact because they are exactly what you'd want to advise with that idea. You write down exactly what you need to get better at, and by getting better at the task you're looking into, then you know exactly what you need to get done. It's engaging in a way that I haven't seen anywhere else. You don't have opportunities to write down what your thoughts are on this drawing or this music piece. Those are great with specific websites I personally use for music, like Album of the Year. But then there's also pieces that you can just share by yourself. You have to express that feeling in your chest. And especially if you're a young man like me, tough times make men like myself stronger. We become better at what we do and hone in on our crafts. And while it's difficult for the time being, it helps aid exactly what we're looking for. Life may be challenging, and we might not have all the ideas we want to write on a piece of paper. But even with the worst handwriting, and even with the worst ideas, sometimes that's all it takes. You can rip out the piece of paper in your journal, throw the idea away, and start new. And that's why I say journals are timeless. Even if this was a plug to get you out and write, it does make me understand that a lot of adults, and hell, even kids my age, we don't write as much as we realistically should. Writing gets us the ideas where we want, and the reason why we use it is not to just burn trees, but it's to use them to our advantage. I remember over winter break, I haven't wrote for 2 weeks straight on a piece of paper, so when I got back into school and used a pencil for the first time in weeks, my hands started like squirming all over the place, and it was so tension filled, and I couldn't exactly explain it. But that's exactly why I would suggest journaling. It keeps us in check. It knows exactly what we need to get done. And by the end of the day, we have a specific agenda we have finished. I want to leave off with one final message about journaling and exactly why I love it as much as I do. There's hundreds of papers out in the world, and even with people saying try to save trees, notebooks are just going to be created forever and ever. And instead of wasting it, we should realistically use it up and effectively create ideas that can change lives. If given the platform, our lives can become even better than they already are. We have all the resources we need. All we need to do now is share exactly what we have in mind. By using those ideas, we then create something way greater and bigger than us. And like these journals here, they'll be looked at fondly. Hopefully fondly, because teenage years are weird. But in that sense, I do appreciate the journals that got me to this point here. And allowing myself to write and create makes me the strong and successful writer I feel I am and will become. If you say you're a writer, you will write. And if you journal, you will become that exact successful person you always wanted to be. Thanks for checking this message out. And if you want to check out my book, it's free for now in the top link of the description. Honestly, I would say it changes lives. If you read it, I would suggest it would absolutely change your life too. Check me out on my other socials, and until next time, take care.